Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pai, in December 2018, you put the brakes on $4.5 billion Mobility Fund 2 program because of questions about the accuracy of the maps. And Senator Langford just went into that in detail. You said, and I quote, "It's critical that we know where the access is and where it's not. We must ensure that the data is accurate before we proceed." But over the course of last year, you seem to have had change of heart. And the reason I say that, you now want to distribute $16 billion through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund and $9 billion through the 5G fund as soon as possible, because you say there is simply no excuse for the Commission to wait. If you can't get the $4 billion out, how in the heck do you want to get the $25 billion out without having anything more accurate?
Senator, two things. First, those are two different funds. We're talking about the Mobility Fund, which was $4.5 billion.
The maps are wrong both.
No, actually, Senator, they're not with respect to Phase 1 of the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. We know there are millions of locations across this country. Everybody agrees, no matter what map you consult, that they're unserved. We know there are 230,000 estimated locations in West Virginia alone that we know for a fact are unserved. We know that those people deserve digital opportunity just like anybody else. And so the suggestion that we put off Phase 1 or wait until the maps are accurate for different areas is sort of like saying we're not going to treat a sick patient unless we know every other person in the community who could possibly be sick. We know that these people in West Virginia and around the country do not have broadband. We know that for a fact. To make them wait until other areas.
Well, you didn't know that before, because in my state, I can tell you, your maps were showing that they did.
That's on the mobility side, Senator.
That's the mobility side, but no difference, I mean, from the standpoint.
No, on the fixed broadband side, Senator, we know every map shows that there are parts of West Virginia that are unserved.
Let me ask you,
I don't want them to wait.
Rosenworcel, on this. You came to the state, and I appreciate very much. You saw we never even had 1G.
I did.
Okay. And you saw how horrible it was. How the rural areas, whether it be West Virginia, whether it be Oklahoma, wherever, are ever going to get served?
You know, I remember being in Romney with you and talking to the folks that had assembled in the town hall, and they were worried about the futures of their communities. They were upset about how business was going to be limited because they didn't have broadband, and they were angry that the FCC maps showed that they did. And it demonstrated to me in incredible clarity that our maps are wrong. And if we give away so many dollars right now without fixing them first, we're going to leave communities like the one I visited with you in West Virginia behind.
Well, we're talking about Mobility Fund. We know that the maps are wrong there. Now we're talking about the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and we're saying they're right?
Yeah, they're just wrong across the board. I mean, that's what I learned in my trip with you. So many people in West Virginia saying that the FCC said they had service when they do not.
That $16 billion is ready to go out the door.
Let's fix it first.
I know, but $16 billion, Chairman Pai, you're ready to go out the door, and he said everything's ready to go. And I'm just saying, in pure, simple language, this is pure politics. You got an election coming up. I want to make sure I don't get left behind. My state and other states want to make sure they don't get left behind. But we shouldn't let politics get in the way of doing it right if the maps aren't done. And they're asking you for times. The chairman says May, June, whenever. We just want to know before you let money start going out.
Senator, again, there are millions of locations that we know for a fact are unserved based on any map that you consult. Waiting to serve those areas until we solve the maps in completely different areas is irresponsible.
You already have.
Now, if my colleague wants to propose formally making those millions of Americans wait, that's perfectly fine. I'd be happy to work with them.
I think what she's
if she wants to
saying is
carve
you ought to
out
do
West
your job.
Virginia, that's fine. But
Saying do the job.
That's exactly what we're doing, Senator. We know there are areas that are unserved, completely unserved. I do not want those Americans to wait for digital opportunity.
Do you have a list of those locations where you plan on putting money in?
Yes, we do, Senator.
Can we get a list of that? Can we see where you're going to put this 9 or 16 billion? It could go up to 25 billion with the 5G fund.
Senator, staff is developing that list, and we'd be happy to get it to you.
Well, can we see it before you let it go out the door?
We go through the standard process, notice and comment, et cetera. So we'd be happy to provide that.
Mr. Carr, do you have any comments on this?
Senator, thank you. I've been in Hamlin and Madison, West Virginia. I've seen for myself the challenges. I think the chairman has it exactly right. We have to move away from this top-level political messaging of there's bad maps. There are bad maps. We have to parse that. The maps are bad because they tell you there's service when there's not. Where the maps tell you there's no service, there is, in fact, no service. So I think what the debate is, let's identify those areas which the chairman has done. Those are the locations in West Virginia. And let's go today, as quickly as we can, to put money into those areas while we move in parallel to solve this area. But to say the maps are bad, we can't go, stays up here, and it doesn't meet the reality of the ground.
Let me be clear.
Very
I agree
quickly,
with my colleagues, but here's what we shouldn't do. We've got $20 billion to spend in the next 10 years. And in the next few months, we're going to spend $16 billion of it without first fixing our maps. that we're going to spend most of our money in the next few months without first fixing our maps for the next 10 years.
Mr. Starks.
Yes, the real point is that the maps are so fundamentally flawed, we really do not even know where broadband is and is not. And so there are a lot of communities that are going to get left behind, are going to miss this $16 billion train because the maps are so bad. The other point that I would interject here really quickly is that because of a last-minute change that we made, there are 30 states and billions of dollars that are going to have their money pitted against a state broadband subsidy program is going to be pitted against RDOF dollars. I think this was fundamentally bad policy. It's going to hurt states. It's going to hurt Americans to have an offset of federal and state dollars in a way that we've never had in what has always been a joint program to solve universal service.
The chairman's trying to weigh in here. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
So the political sleight of hand you've just seen is exactly the problem. We know there are areas that are unserved. We know there are areas where the maps are flawed. What they are saying is essentially, do not serve these areas through phase one, even though we know they're unserved, they're costly to serve, until we fix this problem. Point number two, with respect to the problem that Commissioner Starks has identified, a broadband provider should not be paid twice to do the job once. If a state has said to a broadband provider, here's funding to provide 25 megabit per second service, I do not want the FCC coming over the top and double funding that company or funding another company to do the exact same thing. That's an irresponsible use of taxpayer funds. If you were to do that and run for re-election, people would ask you, Senator, why on earth do you fund this company twice to do the same thing once? That's exactly the same principle we are.
The only thing I would say to any of this, what you're talking about, I hope you're taking into consideration where there's dire poverty and these underserved areas, because if you say the map's already assured that this area is underserved right now and you know that they have no coverage whatsoever, and the money goes there, but you have a stricken poverty, which is dire, and they're showing that the maps are flawed and you haven't fixed the maps, we're going to be left behind because you'll be spending all the money, there's nothing left.
Senator, I couldn't agree more. A few weeks ago, I was in Athete, Wyoming, a very poor part of the Wind River Reservation in rural Wyoming. Folks who are on the wrong side of the digital divide, thanks to our policies of getting that funding out the door because we knew they were unserved, gigabit fiber provided to the members of the Northern Arapaho Nation and the Eastern Shoshone. Papers are never going to brag about it. Cable news is never going to talk about it. That is the digital divide closing because we are not willing to wait to extend digital opportunity to every American we know is unserved.
We're going to have to move on here, but Senator Manchin asked for a list. When do you think you'll have that provided for him and for the rest of us?
Mr. Chairman, if I could clarify that, what I was asking for is all of us should be able to see,
Right.
they're wanting to put $16 billion out the door, okay? And that's the areas that you already know that there is absolutely, the maps are not flawed. You're saying that it already identifies those areas that need coverage. I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying when that goes, we know the areas that are in dire poverty in Appalachia aren't going to get a darn thing because the money is gone. We want to know where you're putting this money before you let it go out. Don't send it out the door and then say, here's where we sent it to.
Well said. That's the list I'm talking about. When do you think that'll be ready?
There too, I will check with the staff that's working on the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund to get you the eligible.
We'll see the
June
list
1?
before you send the money out.
By June 1?
I will check on the, Senator, I can't commit to the time. It depends.
Would you share a copy of that
Oh, absolutely.
with us
Happy to.
before you cut the checks?
This eligible areas list will be public, yes.
Senator, sorry,
But will you share a copy of that with us before you
Yes.
cut the checks?
Sure.
You
I'd be
will?
happy to.
Okay.
Senator, one other
And
argument.
you
I think
think it'll be very soon?
Oh, well,
I'm
I
not
mean,
gonna-
a list of, we're talking about millions of potential locations, so I can't provide, guarantee it's going to be simple, but what I will say is it will be publicly available, and we'd be happy to share that with you when it's complete.
Before you spend the money?
Correct, absolutely. Oh, the entire purpose is, it's for our purpose too, to come up with the eligible areas list.
got
We need
you.
to give
I got you.
certainty to people as to where to bid.